So we do this annually as part of the state legislation requirements. So I'll go through some of those as well as some of the updates and changes for the upcoming school year. You're ready. Let's pause for a second. So just briefly, Section 2801A and Section 807 New York State law drive all of the work that goes into safety planning. And I'll review some of those components here shortly, but some of the major components include safety planning, which you're here to talk about, approving the safety plan in the upcoming board meeting.
Somebody's up there.
Oh,
Just waiting for them to come in.
sorry, Janice.
You can come in. I was like, oh, right, interrupting. Sorry about that.
Sorry, you can help me present. The continuity of operations plan and the remote instruction plan, which were more recent additions over the last few years, as well as emergency drills, which we're all familiar with, fire drills, as well as our emergency lockdown. So state legislation passed originally in 2000, and some of the subsequent statutory changes came in 2016. Some of the primary changes include, of course, safety planning, but some of the other pieces that we've all heard of included in that same component of legislation include code of conduct, child abuse in an education setting, fingerprinting regulations, which we have for all of our employees, as well as school violence prevention and intervention. So let's jump into what some of those statutory changes were back in 2016, which continue to be followed. The first includes importance of parent contact. That includes any suicidal ideation among many of our students. The second is annual training requirements. That includes the mandated training, which at this point last year we switched over to a digital component. And this summer, I'm happy to say, in working with Dr. Shanahan's office, we sent it out early for our staff, so especially with capital work, they can get some of that work done in the summer if they choose, so they can have that done and spend more time in the classroom, which I know a lot of folks have appreciated. A couple other components include the mental health first aid and then team mental health first aid, which are two components that came out of the $500,000 grant the district achieved a few years back. One of the other requirements driven by some of the statutory changes include the identification of the chief emergency officer as well as the district safety committee, which of course we have. It includes parents, students, a board member, Laughlin of course, as well as some of our local fire and emergency management individuals in the community. Some policy changes drove some consistent language, which we'll talk about the incident command system more in a little bit. And then lastly, the 12 drills are identified, 8 being evacuation drills or fire drills, if you will, and 4 lockdown drills. One of the changes this upcoming year I'll go over in a moment is the fact that those drills are required to be quote-unquote trauma informed. And I'll review that here shortly. So in addition to the district safety committee, we also have building level committees, and I'll define those two components here in a moment more specifically. But within those groups, the district is required to have membership, as I've shared already here just a moment ago, of a teacher, administrator, parents, school safety personnel, community members, local law enforcement. And I'll say from my perspective, we've done a really nice job in part because of the involvement of emergency management services through Amherst Police, our 2 fire departments locally, as well as Dennis Gonzalez and Mary Lombosis. They've played a huge part in making sure we've done good work for our community and for our kids. So we talk a lot here about having a common language of instruction, a common language of how we work with kids. We do the same thing with safety planning, and that's driven by those incident command system roles, and those roles are listed here. In addition to that, the district some years back created binders, and you see a picture of them there, so that in the event that something were to happen, there are binders driven by each one of these titles. So each principal, for example, and Mr. Pinella has one as well in case of a district incident, with binders in them so that if the individual who is assigned to, let's say, logistics, they're probably not going to remember all of their roles, right? So what's in them is an exact layout of what those roles are, a reminder of those, as well as contact information, student listings, staff listings, as well as documentation that that individual needs to take during an incident, so that, again, we move quickly in an incident and we have everything at our fingertips. So district safety plan versus an emergency response plan. So the district safety plan is the piece that we're approving this evening. The emergency response plans, and I'll talk about them more here now, are specific to each building, which is why you see the 4 there. And let's go through those a little bit. So this is the development of each. So in terms of the development of the district-wide safety plan, That's looked at by the district-wide safety committee. We make changes to that, and that gets put on our website and then up for approval by the Board of Education. The emergency response plans are reviewed and updated by each emergency response team within each building, with, of course, the direction and guidance from districts, so there's continuity across each plan at its base level. They also designate two teams. One is the emergency response team, as well as a team for post-incident response, which, as you can imagine, is very similar in many ways, but has a couple of unique members on each team. So in terms of the description, I've alluded to this already, but the district-wide safety plan is more broad. I would like it or akin it to district policy. It includes DASA as well as code of conduct language, and it's of course adopted by the Board of Education as we're discussing here this evening, and it's posted on our website for public view. The emergency response plans specific to each building are extremely confidential. They are not out for public consumption, mostly because there's specifics in there such as details on evacuations. We don't want someone in the public who might want to do harm to be aware of or to know. So in those plans, there's specific details for procedures and policies within each emergency response plan at the building level, how individuals specifically respond, including those roles under the ICS model, and then information specific to emergency communications within our community, as well as our evacuation sites. The district plan holds 6 sections. That's the district safety plan, as well as the 2 appendices I referenced earlier. Back in 2021, following COVID, actually both of these followed COVID, came the communicable disease continuity of operations plan. So that is an awful. But that is essentially, how to handle things following an incident similar to what we dealt with back in 2020. Second is a remote instruction plan. Again, if we were to go into remote instruction at home, Dr. Shannon's office created a remote instruction plan that we would follow in that event. So this upcoming year, there were 5 major changes, so I'll go through those 5 here briefly. The first is that, and I referenced this before, that drills need to be trauma informed. So what does that look like? They should not include props, actors, or simulations. They should be developmentally appropriate is the language they use. Students, staff, and parents are to be informed prior to a drill. That is a change. So parents will be informed ahead of time that a drill will occur. Very often, as parents, you've seen an email afterwards saying, we had a drill today, want to let you know everything went great. You'll see an email now beforehand due to this change. The goal, as they stated, and this is the quote, the goal is to practice and prepare, not to scare. Lastly, it talks about making sure that each of your safety team members are rich in resources. I will say from our standpoint, we've always been there. Our PPS staff, our nurses, our folks that we relate within the community, such as emergency response providers, are extremely rich in resources and supported. The second major change talks about full-scale exercises. If, in an event that the district chose to do a full-scale exercise, like the one we did years ago, in consultation with the FBI, they are not to be conducted anymore during the regular school day or when school activities are occurring on school grounds. And second, you may not include students without written consent. So those are 2 of the changes. And then 3 more include if a district has a threat assessment team, and I'll say our district safety committee has been looking at threat assessment teams for the last 1.5 years. Last year we went to a training, and our upcoming agenda actually is going to be discussing the use of a threat assessment team within our district. If you do have a threat assessment team, you have the option then of including that information. My take from the guidance is that in the future, if you do have that, they'll want you to put it in there. And beyond that, my guess is they're going to mandate it at some point in the future. Fourth major change is within your district safety committee, they ask that you have representation from transportation. Now, I will say we already do. Our transportation coordinator is already a member of our committee, so that's a change in the guidance, but it's not a change in our practice. Lastly, they recommend some significant changes to floor plans and area maps. So each emergency response plan that we submit by October 1, but has to be in place by September 1, has to have floor plans and area maps for each building. Now, those are pieces that are not available to the public for all the reasons I shared earlier. But what they've asked is for emergency personnel, if they came on, to make them a little bit more descriptive. So include some of the bullets here, and I won't read all of them, but essentially had a key and a way in which to define important things within the area or within the building, such as water and gas shutoffs, access to emergency equipment, where department lock boxes or key boxes are, etc. So we're in the process of updating our maps to include all of these items. So in terms of those major changes, those have been added to our district safety plan. It's required to be up on our website for a 30-day comment period. That 30-day comment period ends August 13th, as it was put up in mid-July. I have not received any feedback yet at this point. If I were to, certainly I would respond to that, but I have not received any thus far. It would then be approved at your upcoming board meeting on August 20th, which is prior to the required date of September 1. And then all of the plans need to be submitted to the state ed website by October 1. Are there any questions in the process?
You mentioned the addition of bus drivers and monitors that are transportation coordinators. Is that the district transportation?
That's our
coordinator
district
or
transportation
student?
coordinator. So
Okay.
what she's done is, Renee is her name, so she has interacted with first student and let them know sort of what our agendas are and asked them if they would like any representation or feedback. They've requested that she do that on behalf of them, and she's been outstanding, as you may already know, but.
So will that satisfy our
Yes.
requirement for
Yes.
a bus driver
That's
or
correct.
monitor?
Yep. It references transportation. Frankly, an individual bus driver may not have the overarching assessment of the impact of transportation on the school district. But she is. But yes, to answer your question, yes. Any other questions?
The evacuation that happened last spring at the high school, it sounds like it went really smoothly, but was there anything that afterwards, when you guys debriefed or anything like, could this anything need to be clarified or modified?
So I will tell you, I'm not remembering anything specific from that particular event. I will tell you, at the end of every drill, or if it's a true evacuation, they do debrief. As you saw, there's the post team as well. So they do debrief and go over things such as, if a camera or lights weren't working in a certain area, they review that and make any of those changes or adjustments. Or if students were in a special or outside and it didn't go as planned, how can we address that or fix those issues? I don't remember a specific issue with that evacuation.
And one other question, just about the confidentiality of the building. I guess if I were a student, I would know what that plan would be, right?
Well, they know what the evacuation plan is, but there are also a number of other components to a safety response.
They would
So
not know.
those incident command system components, for example, our safety team is trained on their roles, whether you're logistics or communication or the chief evacuation individual or what have you. They know their roles, but the students don't know all of that.
But they would know the evacuation.
Yes, they would know they have to be, right? It's part of the training. I would actually, training essentially is a fire drill or evacuation drill and a lockdown are both training for both our students and our staff, right? So that in and of itself is a training. That's the point.
The other idea is that they're not published because they have maps of the school.
Those are the components that would be a trouble, that's true. That's right. Then I would like to close this public hearing. Thank you so much for your support and your time this evening.
We will open the regular meeting. If we could stand and say the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, everybody, for coming. We have no visitors signed in wishing to speak. We've had no written communication. Do we have any board committee meetings? Anything?
The audit committee met with Director Malecki on August 1st. There was an entry meeting for the audit. And they just went through what the process is, what they're going to do. And then On 9/12, we're meeting again for the results, and then on 9/17, we're going to do a presentation.
I did come in this last week and signed capital bond, a one-year ban for the first part of the capital project borrowing. It was a little over $16 million, right? So it's just a one-year bond anticipation note to start the project off. Anything else? And we will turn it over for the superintendent's report. Oh, I have to do, I'm sorry. Also, board building visits. So, as you know, at the end of August, before school starts, we do, as a board, we tour all the buildings to see the latest and greatest. I think we were talking about August 28th.
Yeah. We're proposing August 28th at 4 p.m. start. It's a Wednesday. That works for everyone.
Custody, could you send out a calendar thing for so the board members who aren't here would have it?
Could you repeat the date, please?
August 28th at 4 p.m.
Meeting at Windermere.
We'll start at Windermere. Then with that, we're on to the superintendent's report.
Yeah. Well, I did want to recognize Deb for all her hard work in getting us up and running with board docs. So tonight's kind of our first official meeting using it. Today we had some discussion around printed materials, and as you can see, we still have printed materials, but we're looking to wean off of the printed materials given the comprehensive nature of board docs. So I'm pleased to see almost everybody prepared with their notebooks tonight. But I did mention to Deb, you know, with this being our first official meeting with board docs, we should still have the printed materials. But as we move to our next meeting, we probably won't have the printed materials. So everyone, if you could please bring your Chromebooks and have your login and password. And I'm not singling anyone out. I'm not trying to publicly point the finger at anyone. It will help to, you know, save a tree, and we'll certainly look to get more acquainted with board docs. You may have seen we did make an adjustment from our original implementation. So our agenda, especially in the personnel section, has a pared down resolution as opposed to the whole resolution, but when you click on it in board docs, it shows the full resolution and for the board members, the backup that goes with it. So that was an adjustment we made after our last meeting. But we'll continue to make materials available for the public as they do when they come in. So they have the stuff printed, but for board members, we'll go digital. And with that, I am pleased to welcome Dr. Shanahan to provide us with a strategic plan update and an update on our diversity, equity, and inclusion committee work.
Or I have access to this. So thank you for giving me the opportunity to talk about the revised strategic plan this evening. And just for historical picture, because we have some new people on the board, our work with the strategic plan began in 2015, and the first strategic plan was accepted in 2017, but it was in partnership with the Warner School of Education at the University of Rochester. There were 42 different stakeholders involved, a lot of qualitative and quantitative data analysis, and from that there is information that we draw on today. And obviously the strategic plan is kind of like our comprehensive roadmap, or it's our guide, and gives us a direction to move in that's cohesive and coherent over time. So one of the outcomes that still lives on today, which is redundant to the wall next to you, is that we have a mission statement, and that is our North Star. When we're working and developing and designing things, we are keeping this mission statement in mind. So just as a reminder, that was a product of this work that still holds a very important place today. The other thing that was a result of this committee was, after looking at all the data and looking at the needs in the district and and the strengths of the district, there were 3 priority areas. One is teaching and learning, one is student life, and the other is Amherst Pride. They're color-coded for a reason, because you'll notice that everything in teaching and learning will be orange in this district, and everything in student life is blue, and Amherst Pride is typically color-coded in green. But under these 3 priority areas, sometimes people call them pillars, sometimes people call them the rocks. They're the major 3 areas in which the initiatives are written underneath to get to the goals that are attached to those. So the work that we're going to do in the update has a focus on these 3 initiatives as we move in. So a strategic plan is a living document, meaning we're going to amend and revise it as we need to. The initial strategic plan was supposed to run the time span of 2017 to 2022. And we were moving along using those initiatives to guide our, the steps that we were taking in those 3 priority areas. And then if you remember 2018-19, 19-20, that pandemic hit. And so what happened is the initiatives under those priority areas weren't as important anymore, because we had to deliver instruction differently, we had to interact with people differently, and we needed different resources and tools to do so. So some of the initiatives that drive the work that we do every year and all year switched. And we were, as you remember, it was pretty quick and fast and furious. So revising wasn't in the plan at the time. So in 2022-23, I came back to you with a revised plan, and that was the work of the initial Strategic Planning Council with some membership changes in parents, because some parents were no longer involved in the district, as well as some new students on the committee. Most of the faculty remained the same. And so what they did was they went through their initiatives and they said, is it still important? Is it not important anymore? Is it important but needs to be revised? And we had some initiatives on there on technology that we thought were really advanced at the time, but when you're forced to teach online, those are no longer necessary anymore. So initiatives like that were removed, and there were others put into place. And we did have a meeting, and you approved that. So now we're moving forward to 2024 and another iteration of this. And to give you history, the iteration came from Priority 2, Student Life. When the Strategic Planning Council made their revisions the previous year, the goal, let me explain this for those of you that are unfamiliar, the goal, it always remains the same. It describes what student life is. So to foster a love of learning through development of the whole child will remain the same, and it defines what we want out of student life. Area of focus just hones us in. But here was the initiative for the year 23-24. All these initiatives have initiation years, even though they take more than 1 year to fully get operational. So for 23-24 school year, the district Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee was tasked with developing a district action plan, which then that provoked the change in the strategic plan. So what occurred is we had a lot of deliberation and conversation about what does that look like. So you develop an action plan, does it sit over here? And your strategic plan sits over here. But this is supposed to be your guide. This is supposed to be your roadmap. But then this is sitting over here. So one of the decisions that we made was, in order to keep the diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives in that action plan relevant and cohesive as a district plan, we decided to integrate them into the strategic plan. So that's why the topic of this particular board meeting is on the readoption of the strategic plan with the DEI initiatives embedded in it. So we did integration is how we decided to go with this. We were also afraid that if we separated them, they just wouldn't get the attention that they needed. So as we worked at 2 different times with the Warner School of Education, we also worked with Recenter, and Recenter is a group that also works on diversity, equity, and inclusion. And one of the things they did was help build our capacity, helped us with some of the data analysis runs and the capacity building that we needed within our diversity, equity, and inclusion committee. Before you can start writing initiatives, you have to make sure you have the capacity to write the initiatives. So that was a piece of the work that the committee did. So we had our Amherst DEI committee, and I'm not sure what view you like most. So we have one by building and the people that are out of building, Board of Education, parents, and districts, and you can kind of flip through. We also have them straight up by stakeholders. So many of these people play multiple roles in the district too, so there's different perspectives that we have. The students on the committee, we started with 4 middle school and 4 high school, and 3 from each consistently came. Their voices are extraordinarily powerful. Notice also that we just don't have teachers on there, we have pupil personnel services, we have some of our social workers on there as well, and our guidance folks, so that they can also inform the work that needs to be done. So I wanted to share some student voice with you because the work that they did and the contributions they made were outstanding. And I think they elevated our work, and their voices are in our work, and I'll be able to show you that with a couple of initiatives. I should tell you, first of all, we gave them, they were nervous, and we gave them a list of questions they could respond to or anything they wanted. So they picked how they wanted to respond to you tonight. So they wanted to talk about their experience, and there's 3 different students here talking.
I decided to participate on the DEI committee, Amherst DEI committee, to really have a student voice, because I know that that would be something that I would be valuable at doing, because I cannot shut up ever. So I thought that if I could be on the committee and I could actually have my voice heard, it would be more beneficial to not only myself, but also my peers, and it would affect people in a good way.
I think it was really good, and like I had the time to like use my voice and say how I feel and like what I experienced, instead of it being like always adults, so like they would know what a student perspective is going through.
My experience as a DEI member, it was really not only fun, but it was like educating, and I felt relaxed. I felt like my answers were validated, and like they would actually listen. And it also felt really good because like I had a lot of ideas, but I didn't, like sometimes I wouldn't feel comfortable sharing them, and I just felt like if I was heard and I wasn't scared, then there would be like a good reaction, and there was anytime I'd speak or any of the students would speak, they'd be really happy. They would really like the answers. So I just felt like there's no reason to be scared, and I just share my answers and see the feedback, and sometimes it'd be positive, sometimes they'd say there's things that I need to work on, but it's just how it goes, and I'm really happy that I did it, and I'm really excited to keep moving on in the next opportunity.
So another piece of this, just in what ways do you think that you contributed or impacted? So that was the question that they wanted to share your answers.
I think the impact.
Sorry. I'm in charge of that.
How might we encourage more students to become involved in this important work?
We can encourage more students by like giving them an example, or like putting it out there, giving them like questions and saying like, oh, do you like to help others? Do you want to feel more involved? Because like kids, they want to use their voice, but sometimes they don't know like what to say or like how to word it, or they would think they're coming off like rudely. But like teachers want to know how their kids are feeling, but they probably just don't know how to say it either. So they just like wait till they come around. But some kids, they probably don't feel like comfortable. So like if we like put it out there and just try to get more students, then they will, come around.
What did being a member of this committee mean to you?
It meant a lot. I didn't really know what it was about when my mom told me about it, and then I was like a little unsure, and I was like, I don't really know if I want to do this. It's a bunch of like people with higher power, and it's going to be like really nerve-wracking to me. But I did it, and it was really fun. I'd say something, they'd be like really shocked, and I was really happy first few times, and then it made me want to keep like asking questions and answering questions. And it felt really good. I'd love to do it next year, and I would love to like tell other people about it, because it's really fun, and it's really like, it's just a way to like get your like thoughts out there, because like a lot of kids, they do have thoughts about DEI, but they're like having other kids there, or kids that aren't really educated, it doesn't make them want to share, because it's going to make them feel like they're not as popular or something. So having other adults there, it made me feel like I was like a part in that I belong there. So I definitely want to do it again. I definitely want to tell other kids about it because it was just an amazing experience for me.
And they were absolutely amazing. Oops, sorry. And this is just
How might we
personal
encourage more
feedback.
students to become involved in this important work?
We can encourage more students by like giving them an example or like
But against personal reflection. Sorry, I didn't want to skip that.
I think
Did I skip that? All right.
you skipped the previous one.
Yeah,
Go back to the
that's
slide.
what was I saying? Baptism? I told you pause.
Yeah.
I told you pause. Go slow.
I think the impact that I had was in shaping our strategic plan was that, again, the student voice part, I was really able to hone that in, especially because since I was a freshman that year that I did it, I really had time, so I'll probably be able to see those lasting changes.
it just like it made me look good and it made others look good, and I was like able to like say how I really felt and like help out and just like impact others, but in like a respectful and like a good way. When we talked about like student life and like being able to get everyone involved and like what's gonna make people like come more together and be like as one.
Us students, we impacted it a lot because there was like a document that we tried to follow by, and then when like the students would talk about it, they would see, oh, this doesn't really relate to the students, or oh, this doesn't really like go with what we've been saying, and it doesn't really make the students feel a certain type of way. So when the students would talk about it, it would build a relationship where we could see both point of views. And I think that like having students on the DEI community, it really helped get an understanding about not just racial and identity views, just like overall everything that we've been talking about. And teachers felt like they could connect to kids more. And the rest of the year went by way better because the teachers could actually teach lessons that connected with us, and it was really perfect. And I really do think that if more kids feels comfortable with joining the committee, it'd be way better and way beneficial to schools, not just in Amherst, but around the world, because I mean, it just helps everyone and made me feel better, made other students feel better, feel like it helps everything.
So one of the things he was talking about, which he wasn't using the word strategic plan, is when we put the initiatives up, that student-led group, of course, they were heavily involved in that. They would tell us, like, you're not asking for our voice here. This is a way that you could do that. So when you look through some of the revisions, and I'll highlight some today, it's because of the voice that they had in the room. And there were a lot of really informative cross conversations between faculty, administrators, and students around understanding the concept from multiple perspectives. So it was really, it was enriching to have them on that committee.
I think the impact that I had
So we had an ambitious timeline with the 23-24 goal for that priority area initiative. We met for 5 full days. 4 of those days was full committee, a lot of learning on our part, a lot of understanding the strategic plan, understanding identity work, understanding diversity and equity inclusion, and building our own capacity so that we were then equipped to look at the initiatives in the 3 priority areas. Additionally, we talked a lot about like what is the purpose of the committee and why are we here. So we did have a subcommittee on March 7th get together and work on like what is a mission vision for that particular committee, like what are we striving for. So it gives it the identity that it needs. Some of the learning that we did was focused on the work coming out of New York State. So we used a culturally responsive sustaining framework as well as a self-assessment tool. In this particular document talks about culturally responsive teaching for students, for teachers, for building administrators, for district administrators, for higher education, for parents, and as well for policy and governance. So all stakeholders involved are included with these, and there are 4 principles in it that are illustrated for each stakeholder group. So people read from their perspective and their stakeholder group, and with the sample of the self-assessment, you could look in particular areas and on a Likert scale, kind of score where we think we are with this. Is it a strength? Is it an area of development? Is it, whoops, we haven't started that yet. So that work is ongoing and continuing. We also looked at the Board of Regents policy on diversity, equity, and inclusion, as well as the joint guidance from the New York State Attorney General and the New York State Department of Education. There were other things that we read as well, but those were some of the driving documents that informed our work. And here is the mission statement for the DEI committee and what are we doing. So the Amherst Central School District is committed to creating diverse, equitable, and inclusive spaces where all students, staff, and stakeholders are accepted, valued, respected, and experience a sense of belonging within the community. A sense of belonging is critical. Being able to come into a space and be your authentic self is important. So there were options I just told you about. So I'm going to walk you through a couple, because if I took you through line by line, it would be a really long night. But I want to just illustrate what you're looking at so that you get an idea of what the committee did. So in the priority area of teaching and learning, remember, they would go through that section and they had a couple choices. They could look at the original initiative and they can say, great as is. It's written the way it should be written. We're good with that. They could say, we like it, but we need to have some revisions around it. So the idea of the initiative is important, but it's not written in a way that encapsulates that DEI lens that we want. Or they could say, we don't want this initiative at all. That did not happen because remember, we just revised the year before, so the initiatives were pretty relevant to the work that needed to be done. Here's an example of 2004-2005, so we'll work on it next year, initiative that will be worked on. I said priority area teaching and learning, that's the goal that always remains the same with teaching and learning. That was set by the original group. The area of focus and then the initiative is to collect and disaggregate data. There are some examples of the type of data: enrollment, attendance, discipline, interventions, counseling, etc., to determine student representation in Regents courses, Regents with support, enrichment at the elementary, honors at middle and high school, academic intervention service, advanced placement courses, etc. So who has access to what and who doesn't have access to what? And so if there are issues with that, then what is the root cause of that? And that would be the committee's work to look at. This year is to look at the data and try to look at what the root causes are and then make plans from there. So that is one that was added in, an initiative that was added in. Here's a revised one. So I know there's a lot of print, but I wanted to put side by side. In 2000, the 23-24 initiative read, audit existing extracurricular activities and explore opportunities for expansion. They revised this because this was still in progress, and there was a lot of conversation from the students about what they thought we needed to be talking about. And everything in orange is in addition to what was up here. So when we look at this in 24-25, we will look at more than what we were originally planning on looking at. So it's audit existing extracurricular activities. We just had student participation before, but they're like, what is there access to transportation? Is that a barrier for some students? Demographics, who's going into which particular clubs, etc. Time they're offered. The type of activity they really wanted, they pushed us on saying that to have different types of activities for students. Student voice in creating clubs was a big push as well. And then explore opportunities for restructuring and expanding. So that will be an initiative that will be worked on this year. But that's an example of a revision where we didn't delete a goal, we just revised what was there to represent more what they were looking for, which made sense. These are new student-like goals. So these two are brand new. One, we're going to identify and administer a district-wide climate survey to gather information from students, faculty, staff, and parents and guardians, as well as there was a lot of discussion to contextualize Initiative 2 around the aesthetics in the building. So identify a walkthrough tool to assess the physical environment of each school building to determine if the physical environment represents our student body and if the building is aesthetically pleasing and welcoming. I can tell you, we did do something several years ago called multilingual ecology, which is we looked specifically at Windermere with this diverse population and we looked at representation there. So this would really be just expanding that work because that was going on pre-COVID. And we did look at like images on the wall. We looked at how physical space is used. So that, I think, will just be a continuation of the work that we have done. And an example out of Amherst Pride, remember these are just some snapshots, if you have the full document, is there was a great deal of discussion across all the groups about, we have 2 elementary buildings that come into the middle school, but the interaction between the 2 schools is very limited until they get into 6th grade, and it's like, hello. So they wanted to explore ways to create more cohesive relationships across the buildings for the students, and to start making connections prior to middle school so that there is some interaction before coming into school. And that is a 24, 25 goal. That's where we are. So those are just some examples. What I've left you with is the full plan to look at, and to look at those different initiatives and to see, where if you will approve those moving forward. So I'll stop there with any questions. Illustrative points, you have the full.
I just have a question about a term. What do you mean by capacity? You use that word capacity, I think, like the third or fourth slide.
Right. So my knowledge. What is my knowledge in this area?
Oh,
so my knowledge and literacy is very high because I spent years in that area. I've read a lot around it. I've researched around. So my capacity to talk around literacy is very high.
Okay.
But if I'm going to talk about other topics, I want to make sure I build my knowledge in those areas, so I speak from a more informed, point of view. But I'll never be not an expert, but I try to develop my knowledge. So if you're going to look at initiatives and start to talk and reshape initiatives, then you need to have a common understanding before we even start the work. So some of it is that. So it's just building my knowledge, my content knowledge. None of us are experts, by the way, in this. We're working through this on a journey together. That's where we're at.
Well, I want to thank Lynn and Amy Stager for their leadership. The committee was very well run and facilitated, as well as Lori and Jess for your participation. We look forward to getting going with the revised strategic plan and 24-25 initiatives this school year. Thank you. The last item I have in the superintendent's report is our board topics. As always, I present this to you as a draft. We've already had some feedback on it. As usual, I will remind everyone that I meet with Paul and Jess the Thursday before every board meeting to set the agenda. If there's a topic that people would like to see on the agenda, certainly you can suggest that to them, and we can either provide you with feedback on the suggestion or add it to the agenda. I will highlight there's 2 items that did come up with this topic being on the agenda for tonight. One is the cell phone ban that you're probably hearing about in today's news because the local district made that decision. There's also information that the governor has been traveling throughout the state throughout the month of July, meeting with stakeholders around this topic, and she plans to propose something in January when she presents her executive budget. So at this point, my recommendation is that we wait to see what comes out of the governor's office and possibly the legislative session this spring, and we add this as a topic when we have more information about where the state might be going with this topic. One of the things that's difficult about this is a piecemeal approach to it, and the governor has even said she doesn't think a district-by-district approach to this topic will be enough for our state, so she does plan to move forward with something that might be more of a directive from the state across so that all public school districts are on the same page. So there's definitely more to come there. We also had the topic of financial reports come up. About what is contained in the financial reports and how might we read them. And I know one board member asked for some more information on navigating those, and then another board member said, well, geez, I never had that information presented to me in detail either. So we thought that might be a topic, if all board members think that that's appropriate, that we would add in November or December for a presentation. Probably, I think when I talked to Paul about this earlier, we talked about November one of the meetings that you actually have the October reports on, we could have Laura and possibly our treasurer just walk you through the reports that are on the agenda for that evening with how to read them type of thing. So those were two things that emerged that weren't on my initial draft. And again, it's a living document. And as things ebb and flow throughout the year, those of you who have been on the board know we add topics as topics come up, and we continue to monitor and adjust. Okay. That's all we have for the superintendent's report.
Okay, thank you. We will need a motion for new regular business items.
I'll make a motion to approve item E, consent of new business, personnel, and financial items.
Any discussion? All those in favor of approving new business items E, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries 5-0. With that, I'd like to welcome some new team members. I see that are here, Mrs. Hanley and Ms. Pence. If you wouldn't mind just standing, we'd like to, you can introduce yourself to us, tell us where you're going to teach.
Okay. I'm Samantha Hanley. It's very nice to meet everyone. I will be the newest 5th grade teacher at Windermere. So I'm very excited to join the team. Thank you.
Fantastic. Welcome aboard.
Catherine's not here.
Oh, okay. I thought we had another person. All right. Ms. Castilli, do we have any follow-up action items?
You asked that I email, I'm going to actually email the entire board about the Board of Alderman.
Great. And hopefully we have executive session, correct? Then we need a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
A second. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Thank you, everybody, for coming.
Thank you.